Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to Football Inc. and Sean Butler TV. We are hoping you are all happy and healthy doing the things you love. We got some transfer news, views, and clues for you. It's Wednesday. It's the 28th of May. The official window hasn't even opened yet. But of course, most teams that want to do business are not hanging around. And I'm not hanging around either today. I'm here with Johnny H3232 from Twitter and Talking Tottenham 1882 on Insta and TikTok. How are you, Johnny? Welcome back, mate. You doing well?
Yeah, all good, all good. It's getting fast and furious now. You've just got to sift through what is clickbait and what is real. You've got clubs putting out false rumours to get rid of their players. You've got agents putting out false rumours of interest in players when there isn't to attract it. So there's a lot of shenanigans, but there's a lot of reality. So what we need to do is like sift through some of the sort of fakey ones, or the ones that really don't have any legs, and find the ones that that are definitely reality, like Zubamendi today for Arsenal. Looks like that's it's been talked about for a heck of a long time, but it looks like it's going to go through today for 51 million pounds.
Not a lot of money, is it, for a player of his standard, mate?
No, not when you mix in with Mourinho. And we know how good those two were at Real Sociedad. The two of them, the double pivot between the two, they were absolutely superb. And, they brought Mourinho in, couldn't get Zubamendi. Looked like he might be going to Liverpool, but that never came off. And now Arsenal are securing him with Jorginho going out now for Arsenal. And him coming in, that's going to be a really good midfield. And although they tried to keep Partey at the club, I think he'll leave due to some of the other activities that have been going on outside.
Do you think Mika Mourinho and Zubamendi, because Mourinho's been sort of repositioned, hasn't he, over the last 6 months or whatever, because of Arsenal's injury crisis at the top end of the pitch? Mourinho was like repositioned as a sort of false nine, or sort of second striker, whatever you want to think of it. Obviously, we know he's a lump of a player, and he's a handful. At times, I think I remember seeing, the boys on AFTV, celebrating Mourinho and the kind of the guile and the genius of Arteta of using that as a repositional pivot, and then and getting some juice out of it. But then as the season went on and Arsenal's injury woes kind of compounded on themselves, and obviously it was probably the difference between them, getting some success and some yield out of the season. If they are going to go and sign a Gyökeres or a Benjamin Sesko, we spoke about that on yesterday's show, then do you see Mourinho being repositioned back into that double pivot, playing alongside Zubamendi? And if so, what do you see the new position then for Declan Rice? And then if he starts as well, then where does that leave Odegaard? It's quite interesting.
Well, listen, you need options, right? You have injuries, you need rotation. This sort of thing where, he won't make the first team. Those days are over. That's like, 90s football. Nowadays, with the amount of games and the intensity of the games, you need a squad. This is a squad-based game now. So, you see it so often, people talking about, oh, well, where's he going to play? Don't worry, he'll get minutes. And, look at the strength in that midfield with Rice, Odegaard, Zubamendi and Mourinho. As I said, they're losing Partey and they're losing Jorginho, so they're not bringing in more players, but they're bringing in better depth. And I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see another player coming in. Well, I expect Arsenal to do a serious amount of business. As I said yesterday, I think they could be overall the biggest spenders. I don't believe they'll be the biggest net spenders, funny enough, because they got a lot of talent that they can sell for decent money.
Who do you see going out the door?
I wouldn't be shocked if Martinelli went, funny enough. I know that might come as a surprise to some, but, I think they bring in talent, other talent, and big money talent. I think they'll look to fund it through sales. I mean, there was also stories of Raya going out to Spain to one of the top clubs, and then bringing back Emil Martinez back to Arsenal, which would be an interesting one. But I think, look, we're only at the beginning of the transfer window. but Arsenal are doing business already. And the other one there's been a lot of talk about is Mark Flecken, Brentford, who's been outstanding this season for Brentford. Really good goalkeeper. Looks to be #1 target for Bayer Leverkusen. And in which case, Brentford, who have had their eye on Kelleher at Liverpool, to make him their #1 keeper. So that's another one that's doing the rounds at the moment. What have you got there?
I've got loads to get through with you, mate, in a minute. We spoke about Emi Martinez. We've got a list of 8 players that might be leaving Aston Villa. I mean, we've got to talk a little bit about, I guess, I don't know, is it a predicament that they're in? Is it going to be a back scratching? We've gone through it before, but we might have to go through it again. We have got 8 players. We've got Florian Wirtz's deal. Looks like it's done. Obviously, Cunha yesterday, that deal is done as well. Teams are starting to make waves. And look, you're looking around and you're thinking, well, at the moment, like there's obviously going to be the early wave of transfers, Johnny, right? Like there's going to be these the clubs that make the early mover advantage. But then you also look at other clubs and you kind of wonder whether, that some of them may need a striker. Like you look at Liverpool, right? So Florian Wirtz, 150 million quid. They're going to need a new striker at some point. Now, are they going to get stuck and get caught up in a transfer battle and a bidding war with the likes of Arsenal and Chelsea and maybe Man United? If Man United don't get Liam Delap, who I think is a player that is such value there for 30 million. Or are they gonna wait, right? Wait for a year until all of their main competition have already, essentially shot their load, if you like, forgive me for not having a better choice of words there, and gone for a relatively deep market that's around, compared to and relative to comparable seasons. Are they going to wait 12 months and then are Liverpool going to go, you know what, you guys go after it now? Liverpool have got like a track record of not rushing their business, waiting for the right guy, waiting for the right moment, waiting for the right price, and then pulling the trigger. And I just wonder whether Liverpool are going to get stuck into this transfer, a sort of merry-go-round with the strikers market right now. If they can find a buyer for Darwin Núñez, are they going to go and get stuck in and try and compete for Gyökeres or Sesko, or maybe for Ekiteke, as we spoke about him yesterday? Or are they going to wait, Johnny, for 12 months and see if they can get Alexander Isak out of Newcastle?
I think Liverpool, to the surprise of many people, didn't make many moves in the summer transfer window. He bought in, was it not Sobosai? He bought in, what's his name, who's still MIA, the Italian boy. I keep forgetting his name now. To Liverpool.
Sorry. Yeah.
Played about 3 games. It'll come to me in a minute. But no, I think last season Liverpool were very measured. They didn't rush in, and I think Slot, rightly so, thought he had the squad to get them through, and he was proved right. And I think they've planned for a long time exactly who they wanted, and they got Frimpong in, Chiesa. That's it. Yeah, they bought in Frimpong, and they bought in Florian Wirtz. And they'll probably bring in others. So I actually think right now that Liverpool know exactly what they want and who they want to get. And let's be honest, they've secured Salah. I don't expect Van Dijk to leave. And we know that Trent's leaving, but, Conor Bradley signed a new contract. So that'd be interesting battle there between Frimpong and Conor Bradley. I wouldn't worry about Liverpool. I think Liverpool might be worrying a little bit about Arsenal, because Arsenal, let's be honest, had Arsenal bought a striker like they should have done,
they're 1 or 2 players away.
They would have been very close to Liverpool, and I expect them to do the business. The one that's interesting me, it really is Manchester City. Why did they pull out of Florian Wirtz? Why have they not gone hard, considering the tail off? We've seen Grealish, really since he got put on that big contract, his form's fallen off of a cliff. He's nowhere near produced the form of the Champions League run of the previous season. And
I've got Jack in a second, mate. So I don't want to jump too soon. It's part of the schedule.
Yeah.
I don't want to cut you off, but for me,
Yeah,
I think that Manchester City's reluctance to get stuck into a war with Liverpool is the fear of them getting beaten. And I think that Manchester City have got an ego. The buyers there, the owners there, that they always think they can get what they want, and most of the time they can. But right now, I think if you are someone like Florian Wirtz, are you going to go to Manchester City or are you going to go to Liverpool? I think that there's a bigger brand, a bigger gravitas, and a bigger just sort of iconic name attached to Liverpool.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? And I just feel like Manchester City, I don't know, but this is massive speculation and just me just sort of stabbing in the dark here without knowing any of the intricacies. But I would just imagine that if they went toe to toe with Liverpool, they would lose, and that might be more meaningful on some sort of precedent being set around who is the real big boy in the Premier League at this stage, at this current moment in time. And I don't think they wanted to do it, and I also don't think they necessarily want to drop £150 million on a player. Don't get me wrong, Florian Wirtz, Johnny, is one of, if not the most exciting creative player in the game, at least in Europe. But 150 bar is a hell of a lot of money, right? And
do you think it's going to be that, Sean? Do you actually think it's going to be that? I think that's paper talk.
Like it. I mean, I don't know. It seems everywhere I'm reading today. I was looking at an article right now from the Mirror saying Florian Wirtz to Liverpool. The transfer has been given the green light as a 5-year plan pays off. And the number is they've submitted an opening bid of 100 million plus add-ons for the 22-year-old. That's an opening bid. So, it's going to be somewhere between 100 and 150. And that might be euros. I don't look, who knows? But either way, it's a punchy amount of money for a 22-year-old that's only done it in the German league for a team
100%.
That is one of the teams that kind of that like I say, I'm not calling the German league a farmers league. I wouldn't be so disrespectful, but it certainly is a league where it's difficult to gauge whether or not these players are always going to transition. And for what it's worth, I've seen a hell of a lot of German fans on Twitter saying, "I'll bite your hand off for anything like that." He can be not temperamental, but a little bit tempestuous. He can be a little bit kind of just like he's not necessarily this perfect player, which you have to price in perfection to pay £150 million for a guy, right? Especially if he's going to be getting 250 grand a week or whatever he's going to be earning. That's a hell of a lot of money. And does one player really make that much of a difference in terms of the return on investment for a team like Liverpool?
Listen, I mean, look, they've identified him. What I would say about Arne Slot, when he was at Feyenoord, he was used to having his squad stripped out at the end of each season. He lost countless amount of players and had to rebuild. And I think his talent ID is absolutely spot on. We've seen it with the players that he's lost, and everyone's thinking there's no way he's going to get back and he's going to do it again. And yet he found a way to do it, and at his previous club. So I don't doubt his talent ID and his ability to understand what's needed. And as I said before, it was quite surprising. New manager coming in, he did not splash the cash. All he bought was the new goalkeeper and Malish Billy.
Yeah, we're not even sure. We're not even sure what's happening with him. I've seen some comments saying that he's not sure if he's staying or he's going back out on loan again. It's a wild one, isn't it?
He'll come. I think he'll come because Kelleher, as I said, he deserves to be a number one. It'll be difficult for him to leave Liverpool, but going to Brentford, I know it's a step down. Where do you go after Liverpool? It's normally a step down, but do you want to play first team football? Do you want to be your own man? And I think he's proved time and time again that he's got the ability to do it. So I think it would be an interesting battle between Alisson and Marashvili for the number one jersey, and both will get both because of. I said this last season. Funny enough, with Spurs, you need a top quality backup keeper because unlike the old days where all the keeper did was catch the ball and boot it out, now they're playing out from the back. They're playing much riskier football. They're coming more into contact foot on foot with attackers. And we're seeing more and more goalkeeper injuries last season just gone, than I can remember. We've seen all of them. So many of the keepers get injured this season. So I think it's imperative that you have a top backup. You've gone to the days where, you can just have an also-ran as your number two.
Oh, 100%. And it begs the question, where does Kelleher go? And like you say, if Flecken is going to move on, I remember Flecken was the replacement for David Raya. I
Yeah,
remember when we were trying to get David Raya at Tottenham, we ended up going and getting Vicario out of nowhere. We didn't know,
yeah,
nobody, as far as I can remember, had really had much of an opinion on him or even knew much about him. But we were then juggling up the idea of, who was better, Raya or Vicario. And I think for what it's worth, like I say, there's a guy who walks the dog with me or walks his dog, and I see him 3 times a week. He's a massive Brentford fan. I think I mentioned this on yesterday's show when we were talking about Mbeumo and his future. And he was like, Brentford have always got, the next guy lined up.
right.
And I asked him, I saw him this morning. I said, what do you think about Flecken? And he said, great goalkeeper, but that's one of the areas where we have a never-ending stream of talent. So Brentford, like you say, it might be Kelleher that replaces him. Brentford never leave themselves short, do they? Let's be honest. They're a very organised team. They might buy a player for 10, 15, sell him for 30, 40 to kind of recycle into the system, into the ecosystem. But they never end up, like they might end up with younger players that haven't proven it, but they never seem to drop too far down as a consequence of losing their best players. And you can spin that argument. As the reason why I was asking about you asked a question about Man City and why they didn't go into why they're not getting stuck in for Florian Wirtz. I think Nottingham Forest are probably going to have to deal with the consequences of Wirtz going to Liverpool. I think that Man City will probably look towards Morgan Gibbs-White as a secondary option to come in, bearing in mind that sort of Manchester City are more of like or at least Pep Guardiola's system is more of it's a team game. Like we have superstars in most positions, but he doesn't really like. In Australia, there's a phrase called tall poppy syndrome, right? Whenever someone gets a little bit above their station, the Australian people tend to sort of hack them down and see if they can come again with a bit more humble approach to life. I know they did that with Leighton Hewitt, the tennis player, as the best example. But I just wonder whether or not like Morgan Gibbs-White is a better fit for Manchester City because they are more of a team game where they sacrifice the individuals sort of gravitas and the ego, and they kind of work it through everyone. Maybe that's part of the reason why Erling Haaland hasn't had quite such a sensational second season as his first season.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I was surprised. I was really surprised that they sold Alvarez because for me, I thought it was going to be the new Aguero. I mean, I didn't put my house on it, but I really felt that he was going to be Man City's Aguero. And I thought they were great foil for each other between him and Haaland. And they seemed to work a great pivot between the two.
Yeah.
I don't think they've looked anywhere near as effective since he's gone. Mamouche has come in. He's going to be dangerous. But I just think that how do you lose a Kevin De Bruyne, an Alvarez, and a Grealish, and we got Gundogan, coming to the end of his, his time there. He's getting
Silver as well. Like they're going through a whole transition, aren't they?
Yeah, it's a massive transition. So that's why I'm kind of shocked. Are they going to go for, like you said, a Morgan's Gibbs-White and not go for the star names and try to build something from a team basis rather than the big name individuals? They're not going to go out and spend, 50 million they bought Kyle Walker for at the time, which today's money was probably like 80 million plus.
Yeah. Look, he's going as well, isn't it? I mean, you look at I remember looking at his last press conference at before the end of the season, and people were asking him about like, why have you left out Jack Grealish again? Is there a problem there? And we're going to come to Jack Grealish in a second, but he said there's no problem with Jack. Like, I've got to leave players out, right? I can only put 24 in the squad, and I can only put 11 on the pitch. And he mentioned Kuzanov, right? And Kuzanov was a player that back in January, I remember Tottenham were linked with him as well. And I said, not sure about him, not sure he's ready yet. He's a super fast, super physical guy. And I'm sure he'll become a great player, but whoever's going to buy him, what is it that your expectations are? And it turned out he hasn't really been a mainstay for City so far. He made a couple of horrendous mistakes in his early days, maybe teething problems. He's a shocker on his debut.
Yeah,
and he's been left out towards the end of the season as well. So it's just one of those questions where, like, are Manchester City going through anything more than like a temporal moment in time that is, a part and parcel of the transition from the old guard to the new, right? Where you're pivoting from 32-year-olds that have been playing together for a decade, give or take, and then you're moving through that transition very quickly, which is what City are doing, right? They front loaded a lot of their activity that was excuse me, intended for the summer. They brought them in January to try and have like a late second wind in the league. And they had some, but they had one, but it was too little too late. At least they secured their Champions League. But, I don't know, really. I don't know whether Manchester City are going a little bit too much the way that Tottenham did it, but on a more grander scale. Like, if you pivot too quickly towards youth-centric, and like Tottenham have done it, clearly, and it's to Ange's, maybe in defence of Ange, but that's a lot to handle. But Manchester City are also doing it. Is Morgan Gibbs-White really the solution to replace Kevin De Bruyne? I mean, obviously Florian Wirtz is, but at that price point, does that limit what they can do in other things? We don't know what's going on with the 115 charges. We don't know any of those things. And City has spent a lot of money in January. So, it's one of those kind of, are you kind of running before you can walk with the transition, with the kind of the next generation of players? Is there somewhere in between a Morgan Gibbs-White and a Florian Wirtz that can land, somewhere in the middle where that you've got real quality that's going to be a difference maker, and also leave some budget for the next player? Because if you're going for a Florian Wirtz type, that kind of chews up most of your business. And back to the point I made a minute ago, it's very difficult to envision Liverpool being able to do a Florian Wirtz and a Frimpong and also someone like an Isaac or someone like a Sesko or a Gyökeres, should they wanted to have done that. They can't. I probably would imagine that it's going to be even difficult for Liverpool to be able to do it all in one summer, Johnny.
I just think that when you look at some of the players that were Man City had, you look at Delap, you look at Morgan Rogers, you look at what's his name, the Brazilian who we keep looking at as a six out in Italy that started
Edison.
off.
Edison?
No, not Edison. No. The one that you wanted to come as plays as a six, Brazilian.
Where's he playing? I'm not sure you're talking about. Where's he playing?
Yeah, you do. He's ex-Man City. Ex-Man City. You obviously forgotten.
I'm not sure who you're talking about.
You asked for him to come to. You wanted him to come back to Spurs of all places. He's a six, Brazilian six. He left. He was at Villa. Went to Man.
Is it Villa?
Yeah.
Not City. What's his name?
It's ex-Villa. It's ex-Man
Dougie
City.
Dougie Luiz.
Yeah, it's ex-Man City.
Yeah, but years ago. Yeah. Okay, yeah.
But my point is, Man City are producing so many of the players. Are they making a mistake with who they're letting go? I think it was a mistake to let Alvarez go. I think I don't think it was a mistake to let Zinchenko go, for example. But I do think Morgan Rogers, for example.
The guy Cole Palmer.
Exactly right. So what I'm saying to you,
that's their biggest one, isn't it? That Cole Palmer was like, what were they doing there?
Cole Palmer. It's Cole Palmer. But what I'm saying here is that mismanagement of the talent you have in your own backyard that you've allowed. I mean, you think about those players, Morgan Rogers, as I said, Delap, Cole Palmer, and there's others there that they've let go who could really seriously do a job for the club right now.
They let go of Pedro Porro as well, and they want him back apparently.
Correct. So there's a whole host. I think there's about 5 or 6 top players that Man City could definitely fit into their squad, right, or into their team right now that they've let go. So is that an oversight on their part? Because had those players still been at Man City, imagine their value. I mean, if you were buying Delap from Man City, you wouldn't be paying 30 million. You wouldn't be paying 30 million for Morgan Rogers if you were trying to get him out of Man City right now. So I think they've made a mistake there with some of their dealings. That's the problem when you produce so much talent. You're going to let some of it go, as Chelsea might have found out, because they've let loads go. And yet they bought out, they must have bought about 40 players since Todd Bowley's come in. Who else you got on the list there?
So I want to pivot quickly to Newcastle United. So rumours out today that Newcastle United have entered discussions for both. Well, I mean, it's actually quite crazy how it's not uncommon for this to be the case, but it feels like this summer, right now, it feels like it's a perennial story that everyone that Tottenham are interested in, as are the players, the teams around us that are champing at the bit for the same sort of level players, right? I've been saying it for months. Every time I speak about Mark Gahey, I have to mention Newcastle United's name. Every time I mention players like Brian and Mbeumo, you're looking at Aston Villa, you're looking at Newcastle. It's the same Chelsea,
Well, it's bound
the same
to be.
team, all these players. But yesterday, the story was Manchester United are about to put a £50 million bid in for Brian and Mbeumo. Then Romano comes out and says, after Liam Delap and Cunha, United will have to sell before they can buy. They haven't got any more change, which obviously gives Tottenham a sniff maybe of getting involved. But we have to wait until we get certain people in place and we know the clarity on our future with regards, directors of football and who's pulling the strings and our manager. But Newcastle United don't have any of those problems. The only problem that Newcastle United have got that they're losing Paul Mitchell. He's leaving the club tomorrow or Friday. Again, yeah. So, but there is the news out today that Mark Gahey and Brian Mbeumo are now both in discussions with Newcastle United. And I just sit there and think, that to me is
a game changer.
It's perfect business for Newcastle United, right? So Newcastle United have got an incredible first 11. They've got an incredible probably 14 or 15 players in their squad. But after that, it tails off pretty violently. They don't have a deep enough squad.
I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say personally. I know you're not a massive fan of, say, Jacob Murphy, for example.
We're very much a big fan of him. I'm just saying that he shouldn't be someone that's starting every game for Newcastle.
But I mean, look, the thing is, Jacob Murphy was very good. Then he went off the rails, and now he's come back strong. Maybe Harvey Barnes, drop off there with Harvey Barnes and stuff like that. But when you look at the Joel Lintons, Isaac, Gumaresh, Tonali, right? They are very, very good players. I think maybe defensively is where they could do with the upgrade, and that's why Mark Gahey is one of those. But look, I think when you look at the press and some of the players, whenever they link a player, I think it's just lazy journalism that they throw in 3 or 4 other names of clubs interested, because let's be honest, everyone knows Spurs need a new defender, we need a new left back, we need a new creative midfielder, so on and so forth. So it doesn't take moment of genius when you work through all the clubs like that. Arsenal need a striker, so every time a striker's thrown into the mix, this is being chased by Man U, Man City, Arsenal, Spurs, so on and so forth. So that's what I'm saying is going through all of the stories and finding some real meat on the bone.
I hear you on that one. I don't know the substance or the qualification of the story, but it's been banded around this morning in pretty decent.
FFP, Sean? What about FFP for Newcastle and PSR? How do they sit?
They're okay. I mean, they're going to earn themselves another 100 million quid. They're back in the Champions League. They got in the Champions League, and they sat out last season. This season, they're back in it. And for them to be able to fight on multiple fronts, they're in a similar sort of spot as Tottenham. Like, I look at Newcastle and Tottenham, and I think that there's not much difference. In terms of the draw, if you're Mark Gahey, let me ask you this, right? If Tottenham sell Romero to Atletico Madrid, put money aside for a second. I don't think that Newcastle United are in the position to be paying someone 250, 270 grand a week. I don't think they're there yet, right? They don't earn the same revenue. But the Champions League revenue is obviously £100 million circa. Slightly less if you don't do badly, slightly more if you do well. Similar to Aston Villa. I don't think they're in the position where they can be spending 250 a grand a week and bonuses and all those things. So let's just assume that they're in the same ballpark, that both clubs can afford the transfer, both clubs can pay the wages that Gahey wants or his agent's asking for. Who do you think is the bigger draw right now? Tottenham Hotspur or Newcastle United?
Well, I think it all depends. If you want to stay in London, look, don't make I make no bones about it, right? When you're coming, if you're from London, I think most of the time you want to stay in London. And when you're abroad, there's a draw about being in London. It's as simple as that. We saw yesterday the story of who's the guy behind the Saudi boxing?
Turkey. Turkey, his name is. I think his name is Turkey.
Turkey, right? Now, he's looking at buying a club. He wants to buy a club. and he's been recommended Sheffield Wednesday. No, he's not interested. He wants a club in the south, right? So he's looking at Millwall and Southampton. Can you imagine what a game changer that is? He's coming in. What I'm saying is that I think most people want to live their life. If you're bringing your family, no disrespect to up north. I mean, I go up north all the time traveling, and people are lovely. But what I'm saying to you is the perception from abroad, when you're moving your family,
London's where you want to be.
London is more often than not where you want to be. So I think, the problem with a club like Spurs is, we haven't been willing to pay the wages, which is why we are 42% of our income spent on wages. So I think we're going to have to up that this summer to attract the big boys, and we've got the margin for it. The other thing is with these clubs, what a lot of people don't seem to understand is a lot of players have triggers in their contract, i.e., that they must always be level with the wages of X, Y, and Z. They can never be the lowest. They've got to be at the top of the wage structure. So, for example, if someone comes in and X player is on 150 grand a week, and that's the maximum, and you bring a player in at 200, there could easily be a trigger to push that.
Yeah, I don't think Tottenham have that in their ranks right now. It's actually really interesting. I saw
some do.
I know, yeah, I'm not sure Newcastle do either, but I saw, yeah, you're absolutely right. Some do. I saw a podcast clip from Kieran Maguire, who was being interviewed by Rio Ferdinand, who asked the question, who's the best run club financially in the Premier League? And Kieran Maguire said, financially, no question about it, Daniel Levy and Tottenham. He said one of the major things is that Daniel Levy doesn't have to pay any bonuses or very little bonuses relative to others when they do well in Europe or when they do it anywhere in any cup competitions. And that's probably because most players that come to Tottenham and their agents historically don't think there's much of a chance of good outcomes coming in cup competitions. And so they don't bother trying to add on incentives around those sorts of unlikely outcomes for their compensation. Not the case for teams like Manchester United, who had to pay £3 million to Chelsea a couple of days ago because Mason Mount qualified for a £3 million kicker for Chelsea simply by qualifying for the final, not even for winning it. And so, there's a lot of
Is that why Mickey Van de Ven? Is that why Mickey Van de Ven said, when he was signing for Spurs, what are you signing for them for? They never win anything. So you're saying agent.
Yeah, so I'm not sure that'll be the case going forward. I think most so Daniel Levy's now got to kind of contend with a whole new set of precedents, right? But just getting back to the before we move on to Jack Grealish, I just wanted to ask you just on a nut. I hear your point about London being a big draw, and I think that Tottenham Stadium is a better draw than Newcastle. Obviously, they're going to be rebuilding their stadium, whether that's not financed yet, which is interesting. I think that the Saudi, you would have thought that they would have financed it on some sort of commensurate rating, but they seem like they're not. They're going to go and get funding for it. So even the wealthiest people in the world that have got more money in the ground than exists in the history of humankind, even they don't want to use their own money to build a new stadium. So it's interesting. But if you are Mark Gahey, if you are Brian Mbuemo, Johnny, and you have comparative offers from someone like Tottenham and someone like Newcastle United, just on the draw, just on the project, just on the relative strengths of each club, and factoring in the location, the stadium, all those other those incidentals, who do you pick?
Look, there are incentives that the Saudis can offer that Spurs can't. Would your family like a home in Saudi? Right? We can provide you one as part of the deal. Right? There's all sorts of inducements that they can offer, which are off the wall, just an add-on. I mean, what's it to the Saudis to add a house to a contract out in Saudi Arabia, a growing place where, more and more people seem to be going? They can offer more inducements. It's whether or not that inducement will appeal to, there are footballers that have been offered deals to go out to Saudi Arabia, but the wife doesn't want to go out there with the family and live that life. So the husband's had to go on and out there on his own, and it hasn't worked out. So it's not all about money. But I think,
so where do you land? Do you think that Mark Gahey chooses Newcastle over Tottenham?
look, ultimately, players want money, right? And it's a way up, right? Do you want more money? Look, if Spurs are offering 170 grand a week, but you're living in London, and Newcastle are offering 200 grand a week, but you're living in Newcastle, maybe you'll think, you know what, for the 30,000, I'm quite happy. I'd rather live in London. So, I think.
You're telling me there's a chance.
I think there's a chance. I think there is a chance. Yeah, I think there's a chance.
Depends
on the manager. It's the same with all of these things. Like right now, Crystal Palace will be able to get players in because of Glasner's reputation, winning trophy at Eintracht Frankfurt, winning a trophy at Crystal Palace, and his expansive football and what he's done to players. He's a hands-on coach, and we can see that. So, in the player development. So I do think that he'll be able to attract players. Right now, Spurs, for example, can't attract anybody. What about Maresco at Chelsea? Is he the coach that's going to attract people when he's got another 45 other players in a holding pen? Is that, waiting to come in who can't get a game? I think it's going to be club by club. Again, Amorim. Do you want to go and sign and play for Amorim, knowing that, the season he's had? Is he going to turn it around? These are all things to bear in mind.
Well, apparently Liam Delap does, and apparently Cunha did as well. So it's an interesting one that they're acting like a team that's just won the Europa League, but in fact they're just a team that only finished 17th
with very little money. Sean, apparently.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see what happens to that one. I was going to move on to Jack Grealish, but I just wanted to ask you. You mentioned Oliver Glasner there. He's someone that came out and on Sky Sports today, there was an announcement that he said that he is 99% likely to stay at Crystal Palace. Not probably news to Tottenham fans' ears, not maybe news to a few other managers or a few other fans of a few other clubs that are thinking about, whether they've got the right manager in charge for next season. Let me ask you this just quickly. I know this isn't a Tottenham stream, this is an all football stream, but that does include Tottenham, so we should probably spend a couple of seconds on it. Ange Postecoglou, his future is splitting the fan base in half at the moment, as it always is at Tottenham. Every topic is a 50-50 down the middle. For me personally, whilst I am leaning towards Ange out, and as much as I don't really buy into him and his rhetoric anymore, I've always predicated that there's two things. One is, I think on a meritocracy, you can easily make the judgment call that he's somewhat earned it, and that if the club went in that direction, I'd understand it. But more than that, I'm only really interested in him leaving if we can be sure that we're going to bring in someone that's better. And over the last 48 hours, Johnny, I've heard, I only had a very short list of maybe 4 or 5 names of managers that I thought were realistic, viable, and people that I would absolutely replace Ange with. And 2 of them have seemingly ruled themselves out. One of them being Oliver Glasner, who said he's 99% staying at Palace. And the other one being Inzaghi of Inter Milan, who I actually didn't think there was a chance of because I assumed he would stay at Inter. But it turns out he's now going to Saudi Arabia to earn $25 million a year, which is obviously a tough market to compete with, right? So, what's the thoughts there?
Look, I'm Ange out. I thank him very much for the incredible night last week. A week tonight, we were in the San Mamés Stadium in Bilbao, experiencing that incredible feeling when we won after 17 years. But when the emotion's gone and the dust settles, we have to look at the bigger picture. And like I've said, when you've got a gaping wound, you don't pop a sticking plaster on it and hope that that it doesn't peel off. Because if it does peel off, you're going to see the gaping wound has festered. And I cannot hide the fact that since November the 5th, 2023, when we were unbeaten against Chelsea, we've lost 38 games. That's a whole season of defeats. 38 defeats, 22 defeats in the Premier League. The first team in Premier League history to lose 22 games in a season and not get relegated. Losing 10 games at home. The records have been broken over and over and over again. And I'm sorry, if you cannot sustain a Premier League campaign, and also to tell us that, in January, he gave up on the Premier League. Well, that's great when I'm getting in the car along with thousands of others every week. Unbeknown to me that the manager has given up on the league. I can't see how, if you can't balance the Europa League and playing Elfsborg, Carrier Bag and the rest, and have a Premier League campaign, how are you going to manage it when you're playing Real Madrid, Barcelona, and the like? So for me, thank you very much. I appreciate your work. Go down in history, walk off with your head held high, and thank you very much. But we need to bring in another manager who's a coach, not a philosopher.
That's the point. That's the point I'm asking, though, Johnny. Right? If Oliver Glasner's ruled himself out and Inzaghi's ruled himself out, then which managers are left that are worth the dice roll? Is it, obviously Xavi's one.
Really would you really keep him? If
Well, it depends what you offer me, mate. I know you're a massive fan of Thomas Frank, but I'm not. So, like, if Thomas Frank is the option, I'd probably go, well,
because he's not sexy, right? There's nothing sexy about.
No. Because I don't think I'm not 100% Ange out unconditionally. Like, fuck him off and see you later. Thank you for nothing. I appreciate that there are reasons why. Like, as much as I don't buy into his bullshit, I don't need him to explain to me in his, I'm going to tell you a million things and one of them will be right. I don't need to hear anything to be able to see the system and the situation through my own eyes. And the situation in which we had to participate in this year was not clean and clear. There were obviously some sort of extenuating circumstances with regards injuries and with regards other things. It doesn't mean let me land. It doesn't mean I forgive him for the deprioritization. It doesn't mean that I didn't hear him when he said that second year is going to be a title challenge. It doesn't mean that I didn't hear him when he said that top 10 and a trophy is not a good season, and yet now he's trying to justify 17th as part of the Grandmaster plan. All of the things you've spoken about 1,000 times, Johnny, I'm 100% leaning on, yeah, thank you next. Thank you next. However, I don't want to just, it's like
we can't guarantee a win for any manager.
If you sell your house before you found your next house, you could end up homeless, right? And I just
listen, but come on, Sean, right? Look, if there's no guarantee if you bring in Ancelotti or whoever, but we need.
But you have to have confidence that the guy that you think is coming in is better. And I think right now, in realistic terms, there's only 4 or 5 managers that I would realistic.
4 or 5 managers better than Ange Postecoglou.
No, there's only 4 or 5 managers that are realistically going to come to Tottenham. There's obviously hundreds of managers that are better, but most of them aren't going to leave. Bearing in mind that you've got to pay 5 million, you'd have to pay £9 million compensation to Brentford just to bring in Thomas Frank. And I don't know what Thomas Frank. I don't think Thomas Frank is that great. So all I'm saying is that I'm sitting there. I'm not saying it's an unconditional. He's got to go. I want to know what's coming in before I get on board it. And if 2 of my shortlist have already ruled themselves out, then suddenly it becomes a little bit problematic.
Who are your other 2?
I like Xavi. I like Edin Terzic. I'd be interested. I probably would roll the dice on Iriola, but I'm not that fussed about him. Thomas Frank, Marco Silva's even ruled himself out, right? So, I'm just sitting there thinking, who's left in the Premier League that's obviously Eddie Howe, 100%, right? Jurgen Klopp, 100%. But these things are not going to happen. So, where's the realistic ones? Maybe Nagelsmann, right? Maybe you can go and have a conversation with him again. He didn't want to come last time. Does that piss me off? Yeah. But was there a reason? Yeah, because we're not successful enough. Maybe now it is. There's an argument to say there's 2 or 3 that are still out there, but I'm not necessarily just going to sack Ange and then see what we get. And
what's happened to you, Sean? Is someone giving you some medication? What's happened?
What do you mean?
You were on the Ange. You were on the Ange out. You were on the Ange.
I am Ange out, but I am Ange out on condition that we're going to get better.
Right, but you've already said, you said yourself, there's hundreds of managers out there that are better than Ange. Not got a clue.
Yeah, but how many of them are going to leave and come to Tottenham?
Well, we'll see, because the money available in Champions League football. It's interesting about Xavi, because Xavi I always thought would be a great option. But when I look at what Xavi left at Barcelona, they were in a bit of a mess, and Hansi Flick has gone in there and more or less the same team. He's turned it around. He's taken, for example, Rafinha, instead of playing him wide left where he was doing nothing, he's pulled him more central, completely changed his game. I want a football coach, Sean. I think a hands-on football coach. You can see look at Glasner, and you can see every player that
said 99% he's not going to leave.
No, you're not missing. Let me finish my point. My point is that you can see the players he's improved. I look at Ange Postecoglou, and apart from Bergvall, who's improved naturally, I don't see a single player in the 2 years he's been there that he's improved because he's not a coach. And I look at, and this is what I'm saying. I want a hands-on coach, and I think most fans, football fans, whatever club they support, want a manager that they can see not only brings in players, but he can be seen to improve players and bring them forward. And, I think, will Nuno leave Forest after the confrontation he had with the owner on the pitch?
Would you take Nuno back?
No, I wouldn't. I'm just saying, right, who would fill that for? Because, the owner there thought it was a no uncertainty they were going to get Champions League football. He had a conflict of interest because he owns Olympiacos. So he took himself off the Nottingham Forest register of ownership. And since he did that, they've gone into freefall and they've ended up in the Conference League. That's
you
why
wouldn't take Nuno back to Tottenham, right?
I don't know, but I'm saying,
why are you bringing up Nuno?
Well, I'm just saying because there's another manager that could possibly leave because he's been offered jobs in Italy and he's been offered jobs in Spain already.
Would you take De Zerbi?
I think he'd end up strangling.
So name me. So if you're Ange out unconditionally and Glasner has ruled himself out pretty much,
listen,
and Marco ruled himself out pretty much, and Marco. Hang on, I'm just saying on a second. If three of the people that have been genuinely linked have ruled themselves out, and what you're left with is Xavi.
Well, you're not left with them, Sean. You're not left with them. You're not left with only 2 managers or 3 managers.
So who do you want, though? So I'm asking you for who do you want? Ange out is not the solution. Someone else in is the solution. Tell me what the solution is.
All right, let's go into the season, right, and have more of the same bullshit, right?
Bring me a solution. The solution for me was Oliver Glasner. The solution for me was Xavi. The solution for me was Inzaghi. If Inzaghi's got chasing the money in Saudi, then he's off. If Glasner's staying at Palace, which is fair enough, then he's off. Xavi is basically where I'm hanging my hat. And if he says no, then I don't know what the fuck we got. Where we go.
Xavi says no, you want Ange to stay.
No, I'm saying that it seriously limits our options, mate.
I don't listen. I think you're all hyping up Ange Postecoglou.
I'm not hyping him up at all. Nothing's changed in my opinion of
very well. I think he's done very well. Congratulations, Ange Postecoglou.
You're putting words in my mouth. Nothing's changed on my vibe with Ange. I'm just saying that Ange leaving is not the solution. Someone else has to come in. Tell me who that is.
But you said you can only there's only 2 managers left that you would take.
No, I said, no, I didn't, mate. There's 100 managers I would take, but 98 of them are not going to leave their club because they're happy. They're in contract. Or they're going to be cost too much.
You don't know. I like the Bologna coach.
Are you winding me up?
Italiano, right? The Bologna coach, right? I think he's a great coach. Is another one I would take, right?
Okay.
What he's done at Bologna is incredible. They won their first trophy in, was it 70 years or whatever many years? Excuse me. Would he come? He's another one like Conte, very fiery. But I would take him. Plays the youth. He's an exciting coach.
I don't know enough about him, to be honest. I haven't researched. I mean, I've seen Bologna's season, but I don't know enough about him as a person or as a stylist or a tactician. So
let me just get a water. Excuse me 1 second.
That's all right. No, yeah. Look, just to be entirely clear, I don't know why Johnny's surprised by my the one thing I always say is don't bring me a problem, bring me a solution. And I think that in the last 48 hours, 2 of my shortlist have basically ruled themselves out. And on that basis, I don't think we should just go blindly
in.
You're winding me up, mate. You are winding me up. Guys, there's 230 people here. Can you please smash a like wherever you watch it? If you're watching on Sean Butler TV, smash a like and the subscribe. If you're watching on Football Inc., smash the like and subscribe. And if you do us a favor, then jump off of that stream or right click in the description. You'll find the other link. Please open it up and do the same over there. We're trying to grow both channels, and there's different content coming out. I'm going to do a video on some football finance stuff There's a football finance thing I want to get through on Sean Butler TV, but also we're going to be banging out the content for Football Link as a dual threat between the two of us over the next 3 months. It's going to be a massive, massive summer of transfer window. Listen, John, let's move on from the Tottenham managerial thing, because this isn't supposed to be a Tottenham show. But I did want to ask you about Jack Grealish. There's 5 potential clubs that Jack Grealish are apparently piquing the interest of, and I want to ask you what you think of the player and where you think he'll end up. So the first name is Tottenham Hotspur. The second name, funnily enough, is Newcastle United. The third name, funnily enough, is Aston Villa going back home, and then the last 2 are AC Milan and Napoli. Napoli are currently the bookmakers favourites to sign Grealish this summer. According to this report here, it would allow him to escape the press scrutiny that he receives in England. The City man would well be versed to look at how Scott McTominay has performed at Napoli to earn the adulation of the passionate Napoli fans. Napoli are also in talks to sign Kevin De Bruyne as well. So the slower pace of Italian football would suit Grealish's talents. Just to give you the roundup of why they think that he might suit AC Milan, Grealish might want to embrace a new challenge and look to resurrect his career abroad. Italy would be the perfect destination, and the former Aston Villa star, would have plenty of suitors in Serie A. AC Milan have been linked with Grealish in recent weeks, and they've signed numerous English players over the last few years, including the Mavericks' former Man City teammate, Kyle Walker. They're the big 5. Would you want him at Tottenham?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. He's going to go out to Italy. Look, when you look at Billy Gilmore playing for Napoli, right, and doing well, he's a tidy little player, ex-Chelsea, but, McTominay, he's one of those funny players, isn't it? You saw him scoring all the time for Scotland, always getting in the right position, and yet he thought he was disposable for Man United. I think he'll go out to Italy. I think, he get caught up in the life in Italy. Personally, I think he will. But, whether it's AC Milan, you got a fly in there, Sean?
I do, yeah. It's annoying me.
Yeah, dive bombing you. I think AC Milan or Napoli could be, linking up again with Kevin De Bruyne. Why not? Why not? I can see him more going to Italy. I think Man City would have to finance some of the deal, because I can't see them paying his humongous wages. I can't see him going to Spurs. Will Villa fans really want him back? I'm not so sure. I think they've moved on.
Not just that, but do Aston Villa have the money right now, mate? There's another story out here around 8 players that might have to leave Aston Villa this summer. So we've got Emi Martinez and Leon Bailey are likely going to have to leave. On top of that, where's the article? Here it is.
The reason for that, guys, is for the fact that, Aston Villa are spending on wages 96% of their income, which is no way sustainable if you don't get Champions League. It will breach FFP and PSR. Now, last season, they were in trouble, and lo and behold, they sold Duran to Saudi Arabia for like 75 million. Plus, they sold some kid who hasn't kicked a ball for serious money. And then Chelsea and them did a deal so that they balanced their books. This season is going to be a little bit more difficult for them to do, but their Saudi brothers are going to be buying up their deadweight to help balance the books here. And I think Bailey will probably be one. Sean, what are you thinking?
Yeah, Bailey and Emi Martinez are the obvious targets to go. Luca Dean's also out of contract. He's got 1 more year of contract, and he's probably got some value in him that might leave. I think Villa are also going to have to lose Marcus Rashford, Marco Asensio, and Axel Disasi. Those 3 players were all signed on loan, so they're disappearing. And then, according to this article here, you can also look at Courtney House. I don't know who this guy is. His contract expected to go, as is a guy called Olsen, who is going to go back to Malmo in Sweden. And then alongside that, like I say, the other 2 being their goalkeeper and their right winger. So, you just think for a second, right? Like the transformation of a team. If Villa have to sell because they've got that 96% wage to turnover ratio, and they were expecting, Champions League revenue, they end up getting Europa League. It's a massive dent. It's about 70 million quid swing. Based on the idea, even if they win the Europa League, they're still only going to earn 30 million from it, versus the 100 million that they probably would have got again, like they did this season. So they're going to have to sell their goalkeeper. Then they're going to have to replace their goalkeeper. Now, are they going to get Kelleher? If they do, are Liverpool going to make it cheap for them? Right? If I'm Kelleher, I go to Aston Villa immediately and replace Martinez. Right, 100% above Brentford. Or do they go in and try and get Flecken? Be interesting to see what happens there. But it's they're probably fortunate in as much as most other teams don't necessarily need to go and find a goalkeeper replacement. I think you can make the argument that Manchester United do. And Manchester United have already sort of
they need two keepers, don't they? Man United. I mean, when I say two keepers, I don't mean two keepers. Mind you, the way they've been playing, they could do with two keepers in the goal
at the same time. Yeah, but like if it's true that Romano has said that, you know, if they're going to sign Liam Delap and Cunha, and they now have to sell before they can buy, then I saw an article as well saying that that Ruben Amorim had said that, you know, to Garnacho, that he has to pray that a decent club comes in for him because his attitude stinks and that he's ungrateful. He's played 58 games this season. He's not happy with the situation. And so, you know, Manchester United have to hope they can get a decent slab of money back for Garnacho. They also have to hope that someone somewhere is going to come in and get them out of hell with regards Marcus Rashford's contract. And at the same time, you know, they want to get Mbuemo, but they have to sell before they can buy it. And they also have to sell before they can buy it if they're going to replace Onana, because Onana's replacement is Altay Bayindir, who's even worse than Onana. So it's a nightmare.
They need two keepers. They definitely need two keepers. Also, you're looking at Kobe Mainu. There's rumours of him wanting out. I think Garnacho isn't a bad player. You know, it'd be interesting to see. I think, you know, he's one of those players that probably needs an arm around the shoulder.
Or a kick up the backside.
Or a kick up the backside, and no one's, because he is dangerous.
But he clearly thinks he's above his station, and I wonder and sit there and go, well, Aston Villa may be able to replace Emi Martinez possibly, because it's not that competitive for a goalkeeping market, and there are some goalkeepers that are going to move in accordance with the desires and the needs of the market, which is fair enough. But then if they got to sell Bailey as well, and they're losing Aston Sal, and they're giving back Marcus Rashford, like, just think about that sort of that complete. And maybe Ollie Watkins has got to go as well. By the way,
the Europa League. Right? They just win the Europa League. That's what
will they win the Europa? I think they will. But like, if you're losing Marcus Rashford, and you're losing Bailey, and you're losing Aston Sal, and you might have to sell Ollie Watkins, that's a massive, massive dent in the strongest part of their squad. Like, that's 4 of their top 5 players disappearing in the top end of the pitch. Where are the goals coming from? Can Morgan Rogers really be expected to put in 20 goals next season? I'm not sure.
Books, you see, this is the thing. They are very clever how they've manipulated the markets over the last two seasons, and we'll probably see more of that again. You know, whether it's selling the non-existent Aston Villa women's team for £150 million. Or whatever it is, somehow or other, they'll circumvent the rules and find some money. But they will have to sell players and send players back without, I don't think there's any doubt. You know, as I said before, there's rumours of, you know, would Emi Martinez end up at Man United? Would Flecken
I can see that happening for sure.
You know, would Flecken end up at Man United? You know,
that's what I mean. There's a couple, but I don't think Man United are going to pay the sort of money that Saudi Arabia are going to pay for Martinez, right? Aston Villa have got 2 options, 2 like Hail Marys here for their financial proprietary. They've got Saudi Arabia, they're going to bail them out by paying £100 million for Bailey and for Emi Martinez, or they've got the creative accounting method if they've got an owner that wants to be able to put the money in anyway and say, you know, we'll sell our left arm to our right arm via the women's team and all that shit. And that's fine. I'm sure that stuff will take place. But regardless, they were probably banking on being in the Champions League, and now they're not. You know, it's a bit of a problem for them. And if they have to sell Ollie Watkins, and if they are losing Aston South, they are losing Axel Disasi, if they are losing Marcus Rashford, all on loan, by the way, and then Ollie Watkins is sold and Bailey's sold, then like, that's a massive reshuffle in their front line, Johnny. And they're not that superb defensively. At home they are, but away from home, they're not that great defensively. They rely on their front line to be able to create 40 chances a game, of which, for what it's worth, Ollie Watkins, whilst he can score 20 goals a season, he has enough chances to put away 40. He just doesn't convert enough. So it's a very fucking interesting dynamic that's going to emerge this summer, and I can't wait to see how it plays out with them. And we're going to figure it all out here, by the way, guys, on Football Inc. and Sean Butler TV. So make sure you smash the like and the subscribe. But on top of that, their goalkeeper leaving. Do they sell? Like he's a top draw goalkeeper that Man United would love to have.
He's been rated. The top
he's world champion, right? He's world champion, but he's a class goalkeeper. He's a shithousery as well. I wonder. Also, just last question on the goalkeeping situation: do you see there's any movement maybe in the Everton goalkeeper moving to Pickford? Do you think he might move and go somewhere to a bigger name because he's got probably a few years left on his lifespan? And is he going to move on?
I think he's a leader. I mean, look at the job David Moyes has done at Everton. I mean, Sean Dyche, right. But, Sean...
That's your Alan Jackson, isn't it? He's just without the mate.
He's deeper. Sean Dyche is deeper. But
Dyche is deeper,
What Moyes has done is come in. Yeah, let's be honest, right? He was thrown under the bus at Man United. Alex didn't really want him to succeed. But I think... I just think that... Moyes has gone in there. He's done a fantastic job at West Ham. He's done a great job at turning Everton around. That result at the end of the season. They got this new kid coming in at the back, O'Brien, who's done very, very well. I think he will stay. Brand new stadium, new era. I think he will stay this season. I think it will take a massive bid to get Jordan Pickford out of the club, and I think Everton would do all they can to keep him. Personally, can't see him leaving.
Yeah, that's fair enough, mate. I think Aston Villa is one to watch this year. It's going to be really fascinating how they navigate their current troubles. There's going to be some interesting PSR and FFP shenanigans, mate, and we will bring it to you right here. That's the hour up, guys. So, Johnny, if there's anything else, mate, any other topics we haven't, I think we've covered it all basically today. What's out about, but.
I think the only thing is that Jim Ratcliffe is the gift that keeps on giving, and no doubt we will hear more Jim Ratcliffe stories. There's some great memes running around at the moment. Loved the one yesterday with the they only got a 2-star food hygiene rating because they found mouse droppings. They obviously cancelled the Man United barbecue, which he was delighted about, but this is a guy who's penny pinching in all the wrong areas, I'm afraid. And to me, this looks like a owner who gets involved in every single aspect of the football club. And that is bad news for Man United, I'm afraid, because that means he's involved with what tea's served, what players have bought, how they coach, and everything, right? Delegate, let the masters... let the main people look. Ashcroft came in there with a fantastic reputation, a very, very good reputation. He's been there 5 minutes, right, after his gardening leave, and he's left, and he's already found a job with England. So I would say there's something wrong with Man United and what's going on at the club, personally. So that's a gift that's going to keep on giving. But I think we're going to have a mad rush now. Especially Man City and Chelsea before the and some of the other teams who are in the Club World Cup. So keep tuned every day because we'll be bringing you the content. And if you're following it from my Instagram, Talking Tottenham 1882, please hit the subscribe button, which is the thumb there, and follow us on Football Inc. I'll get my words out in a minute on Football Inc. Because we're trying to get the numbers up and it helps our algorithm. If you leave some comments for us, that'd be great. We're trying to answer as many as we can. But look forward to tomorrow, Sean. We're probably, as we come off air, there will be another story, guaranteed.
Yeah. And there's no guarantee that we only do one show a day. If there's something happens, if something materializes before the end of the day, then you'll see us again. But until then, if not, we'll wait and see. Just smash the like on your way out, guys. Hit the subscribe. And if you are on Sean Butler TV, get across the Football Link and vice versa. They're both going to go in their own separate directions. But for now, they are kind of just, we're putting out content on both. If you are interested in a Ange Postecoglou debate, then I have got the community's #1 Big Ange fan in Sim from Ben and Sim, coming on to Spurs Talk Show at 6 p.m. in an hour and 50 minutes time.
Oh,
and
really?
I did put out the opportunity.
A counterweight? Can I be a counterweight?
Yeah, you can be there. You can absolutely be there. I said on the We Are Tottenham TV WhatsApp group, I said if anyone else wants to come on as an Ange in, then I'll probably be able to find Johnny as an Ange out that wants to come on. And he said I don't need any help. So it's going to be a fascinating one. So if you want to see the meeting of minds, I love Sim. He's a very intelligent guy and incredibly loyal to his boy. So Johnny and I will take on. Well, I'm going to sit in the middle and I'll play both sides of the coin. So you know what I'm like. I'm a rubber arm. I'm easy to flip, but I'm also strong and conviction. So we'll find out what goes on there. 6 o'clock. You'll find us over on Spurs Talk Show. I'll see you then. If not, I'll see you tomorrow here on Football Link and Sean Butler TV. Thank you, Johnny. It's goodbye from him.
And goodbye from me.
Ciao, ciao.